According to a story in the Washington Post today, leaders in the Southern Baptist Convention, which is the largest Protestant denomination in the country with about 14.5 million members, are basically urging other Southern Baptists to ditch the word Southern. They say the association with the South makes it that much harder to escape the denomination's racist past, and many would say its present, while also creating a hurdle to expand in places outside the South as well as outside the US. But seriously, that change is like rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. At the very least, it's like Lady Antebellum becoming Lady A. You are still the same even if you get rid of that word. We know who you are. Changing the name doesn't change your culture. The biggest problem with the name Southern Baptist Convention isn't even Southern, it's Baptist. To be clear, the SBC isn't actually changing its name. Members and churches and seminaries can still use the Southern Baptist label if they want to. They're just being urged to move away from it. Unlike the Catholic Church, which is a top-down organization based in the Vatican, the SBC is really just a loose coalition of about 50,000 churches. They're all technically independent, even if they choose to operate under the SBC's umbrella, and even if they give it money for mission trips and whatnot. They may work together, but there's no Protestant pope who dictates how they must operate. There is an elected leader, but he doesn't control those churches in the same way the Pope controls even your local Catholic Church. The SBC's current leader, J.D. Greear, told the Washington Post that there's been momentum in shifting to the phrase Great Commission Baptists. The Great Commission, of course, refers to what the resurrected Jesus supposedly told his disciples: go out into the world and spread the gospel. Greear says that is a better reflection of who Southern Baptists are now, rather than any unwanted association with the South. But if Southern Baptist is considered too regional for a global organization, Great Commission Baptists may be too broad. Trying to win converts everywhere could legitimately describe any number of Christian denominations. You are not special within the world of Christianity just because you've decided to take Jesus seriously, at least in theory. So what's wrong with Southern? Why are people like Greear moving away from that? Well, the denomination began in 1845, splitting off from the American Baptist Convention because Baptists who lived in the South basically supported slavery. But even after that ended, the SBC has long been associated with racist people. Members supported segregation. Members supported Jim Crow laws. Even today, members support voter suppression tactics. Now, to his credit, Greear has taken several steps to try and address all that. He has publicly argued that Jesus was, in fact, a brown-skinned Middle Eastern refugee, as opposed to some white dude, which somehow was a controversial thing to say. Greear used Black Lives Matter in a speech, like for real, and in a supportive way, and without adding, but all lives matter. A different Southern Baptist Seminary leader, known for being a conservative, recently said Confederate statues needed to come down. And all of this comes about 25 years after the SBC formally apologized for its racist past. But it's not like you can just walk away from racism by changing your name. In 2016, 86% of Southern Baptist voters picked Donald Trump in the election. Whatever the number is now, it's probably not too far from that. How can the denomination seriously pretend to care about racism when its members have no qualms about voting for a guy who was openly racist during his campaign and who has continued to fan the flames of bigotry during his time in office? One of the most prominent Southern Baptist pastors in the country is Robert Jeffress, a Fox News contributor who is always on there defending whatever Trump says and condemning liberals as if we're enemies of the nation. Jeffress and other Southern Baptist leaders will always tell you they are not racist. But you can't say you oppose racism when you keep electing people who are clearly racist or pushing policies that exacerbate racial tensions. At least you can't expect anyone to take you seriously when you do. But again, Greer is trying to help Southern Baptists escape that awful legacy of theirs, while more famous Southern Baptists aren't helping his case. So good for him, good for Greer. But if the goal is to show people that the SBC is a more welcoming place, changing the window dressing isn't enough. The SBC has been marred more recently by stories of rampant sexual abuse amongst its leaders and people working for them. And unlike the Catholic Church, they didn't keep records of this stuff. Because the churches all operate independently, it's all but impossible to institute any rules about how to address the problem, or how to kick out abusive people. If a church goes rogue, there's just not much the SBC can do about it. It took reporting by the Houston Chronicle newspaper last year to put together a database of Southern Baptist sexual abusers around the country, since the SBC itself wouldn't do it. Their blockbuster report was called Abuse of Faith, and just look at that description. 20 years, 700 victims. Southern Baptist sexual abuse spreads as leaders resist reforms. By the way, that was the first report. Afterwards, more victims began to speak out, and they followed up with even more horrific stories. The denomination is also historically misogynistic. They would never admit that, though. They'll just say, men and women are equal. They just have different roles in the eyes of God. Southern Baptist teaching says that women cannot be pastors or run churches. And most Southern Baptists would tell you women should not even be allowed to preach. They're still also overwhelmingly opposed to LGBTQ rights and homosexuality in general. If the SBC wants to change its image, it needs to change its beliefs. And it's not about to do that. Instead, leaders are pushing for a rebranding. It's a superficial change. It's the bare minimum. They have a long way to go before they are seen as a welcoming, inclusive, force for good religious denomination. The word Southern has plenty of problems, as they rightly recognize, but the Baptist part isn't helping their case either.